So I'm just going to shoot this video really quick because I have to go grade some papers. But this weekend I went on my first full-time tenure track interview. If you've read the title of this video, you know that I did not make it to the second interview, but I learned so much. This was something that I'd never experienced before, and so what I thought I'd do is just tell you about my experience, tell you what I learned from it, so that if and when you get your first full-time interview, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so first, the lead up to the interview. So I applied to a bunch of full-time positions in January and February of this year, and for whatever reason, a lot of schools in my surrounding districts are hiring full-time. So I probably submitted like 12 different applications. Some of them I'm still waiting to hear back from, but this was the first one I heard back from, and I got the first interview, which was great. So basically what they did is I got an email. It said that I'd made it to the first round. They offered me different times they were willing to interview me. It was over a 3-day period, so like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so I just chose a time that worked for me, and that was kind of how I set up the interview. So once your interview time is set up, usually what they'll do is they will have a date that is a couple days away from the first interview time to release the information about the interview. And this is usually done to make sure that everyone has the exact same amount of time to work with whatever information they're going to give you. So in my case, my interview was set for a Sunday. I believe on Wednesday, they sent an email to all the candidates and told us kind of what the interview process was going to be like. Now, I will say that I did not have the best experience with the HR in this particular interview. And this is actually rare because usually when I've had any part-time interviews, HR has been so helpful and great about answering questions or if I have any confusion. But for whatever reason, this particular school, I emailed the HR a couple questions because the information they gave us was a little confusing, and I didn't hear back until the day before my interview, and then they basically just cut and pasted the initial instructions that I was confused about. So yeah, it wasn't the best experience, but in general, if you email HR, they'll usually give you someone that you can email. If you have any questions about their instructions, you'll get a response fairly quickly. Mine was just kind of a rare occurrence where that didn't really work out. It turns out it was fine, that there wasn't that much to do beforehand, that everything they wanted you to do in the 35 minutes that they gave you. So before I talk about that, I just want to cover that basically they'll give you instructions beforehand, and then anything they want you to prepare ahead, they'll let you know so that when you come in, you have everything that you need. So on the day of my interview was scheduled for 11:10 on Sunday. So I got there about 20 minutes early. I checked in with HR, and they just had me kind of wait while they went to see how the other interviews were going. So I ended up actually starting a little bit early because they just had finished early. But yeah, usually if you're there 20 minutes early, it should be plenty of time. So they brought me into a room and they gave me the 5 questions that they wanted me to prepare for the interview. And I had 35 minutes to prepare and then a 35-minute interview. And so that was kind of the basis for this first interview. Let's talk about the different questions that I was asked, because I know when I was doing research and preparing for this interview, that was kind of the main thing that I was looking for. It can be a lot easier if you kind of know what sort of questions you're likely to ask so you can prepare for them. So the first question that I was asked is to prepare a 10-minute lesson. So usually, at least in adjunct interviews, that they allow you to prepare a lesson at home and bring it into the interview to kind of model how you would teach a class. And I always really enjoyed those. I had fun kind of creating lessons to, wow the interviewer. But in this case, they didn't want me or anyone to prepare anything ahead of time. They wanted you to prepare it in this very constrained time frame. So yeah, they gave us 2 readings. There was a short story, there was a graphic novel, and you had to choose one of those and then create a 10-minute lesson around the reading. So I just chose a short story. I was definitely feeling the time constraint, so I chose the one that I was most comfortable with. and then I just did a close analysis, kind of quickly went over things that I wanted to bring up during my analysis lesson, and then after about 10-15 minutes, I moved on to the rest of the questions. So definitely not my most creative lesson, but it was what I could create in that time frame. And so yeah, just that might be something that you want to prepare for, that you might have to create a lesson in a very short amount of time, and just be okay with doing that, and then it's not going to be perfect. The second question was related to the two things that they did have us bring in to the interview. So we were supposed to bring in 5 copies of a sample syllabus from a freshman composition class. If you are in another department, it'll probably be something similar where they'll ask you to bring in a syllabus from whatever class you teach. And they also asked us to bring in a sample schedule from for a semester of a freshman composition class. So they wanted those two things, 5 copies. And then the second question asked us to look at either a unit or an assignment from our schedule and explain why we use it, why it helps students to develop skills that are required by the class, and basically just talk about our rationale for why we teach certain things or why we have certain units or assignments or whatever that is. So that was the second question. So what I did is I just focused on my second unit. I went through my schedule, I had an extra copy, and I highlighted certain parts of it that I wanted to focus in on. And then, I just kind of figured I would talk about these different things. Again, I had a very short amount of time, so I could really give no more than 4 or 5 minutes per question to planning. So I just kind of went through, decided what I was going to focus on, and then I moved to the next question. The third question they had us answer is they wanted us to talk about one lesson or one assignment that we have during the first week of school and why we assign that. So what skills are we trying to teach in that first week, and basically just explain what that assignment is. So this is a question I had not seen before in any of my research. It was not something that I had seen other schools use, but I thought it was a really interesting question. And so if you are going into an interview, consider the different lessons that you teach in your first week, and maybe which ones you might want to bring to light and talk about a little bit more, and just be prepared to talk about how they fit into your curriculum and kind of the requirements for the class. The fourth question was pretty straightforward. They asked us, how do we foster critical thinking in the classroom? Specifically, how do we help develop it in students who might not have been taught critical thinking before, or might not want or feel comfortable with critical thinking? So this is a question that is probably unique to English or composition classes, maybe communication, maybe public speaking. But this is a pretty standard question, and really what they were looking for is for us to talk about how we foster it, but also talk about different challenges that might arise and then how we would handle those. That was the fourth question. The fifth question wanted us to really consider the unique and diverse needs of community college students, and what it asked us was to talk about what kind of basic foundational skills do our students often lack when they come into college composition. So what are some skills that maybe they are supposed to have, but that many of our students just come to class very unprepared for? This I thought was a really interesting question, and really wanted us to talk about our experiences, and talk about kind of what we had learned over our, probably years of teaching at the community college level and the specific needs that those students need. So that was it for the questions. As I said, the interview itself was 35 minutes, including the 10-minute lesson at the very beginning. So it moved really quickly, that honestly, by the time it was done, I felt like I had been in there 5 minutes and not 35 minutes. The committee itself was really nice. I actually found them really welcoming. There was 5 of them in all, and they all took turns asking questions. They did introduce themselves at the beginning of the interview process, and they interacted with me throughout, so they would ask questions or ask follow-ups as we went through. So, and as far as that, I actually found that part of the experience very positive, that I didn't feel like I was overwhelmed or that I couldn't answer certain questions. I definitely felt like I was as prepared as I could be for the interview. So as you've seen, I didn't really go over much in this video, my answers to the questions or kind of my takeaways from it, because that is going to be a much longer video. If you want me to kind of go over my answers and kind of what I think I could have improved for, future interviews, let me know. I'd be happy to do that. But I figured I'd just make this video while it's kind of fresh in my mind, so that if you are preparing for your own full-time interview, you have this as a resource, that you at least know some questions that you could possibly be asked, and you can kind of prepare some answers ahead of time for those. The final thing I want to say before I end this video is that if you are watching and you've also been on an interview like this and haven't made it to the second round, or if you're just struggling to get that first interview, that this is very normal experience, and it is a very hard thing to even get that interview, and even harder to kind of get past the first and second round. And I know this because I remember when I was in grad school, kind of hearing from the teachers and hearing from the other full-time faculty that it wasn't until they had 3, 4, 5 years experience that they were even able to get full-time interviews. That a lot of the time these committees, they don't even want to see you until you have at least a couple years experience under your belt. So if you're really struggling to get these interviews, but you've only been working a couple years, keep that in mind, that it's not personal. It might not be that they're even kind of giving your experience, a good look, that it might just be that they want 3 years, they want 4 years, they want 5 years. So be aware of that, and that, just keep trying, I think is really important. Another thing to keep in mind is that you don't know who you're up against, that, they keep their candidate list very secretive. You're probably never going to know kind of the other candidates that were invited for an interview. So yeah, that you might be up against someone with double your experience, or someone who, knows someone there that, can give them a really good letter of recommendation. So again, not to say that they don't deserve that job, because they totally do, but if you're really struggling to get those second interviews, those third interviews, it's, again, not personal, that you don't know who you're up against, and everything I've heard from full-time faculty just says to keep trying, that a lot of the full-time faculty that I know, they went on 8, 10, 15 interviews before they ever got a full-time position. So just keep trying, just keep turning in those applications, and eventually you are going to find a school that is a good fit for you, and that you'll get that job. Okay, so that is it for today's video. If you have any questions for me, or if you want to share your own experiences with either going on interviews or not getting interviews, please leave that information in the comments. I want to create a community where we can kind of share our experiences and offer support and offer suggestions. So yeah, leave some information in the comments, and I will definitely be looking at those, and I will make sure that you get a response. So I hope that you are having a good week. Keep it up, and let's get through this.